Miss Hart, did you or did you not sign this agreement? The judge asked, his voice echoing off the cramped courtroom walls. I pressed my palms flat against the cool wood of the respondent's table to stop them from shaking. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, turning the peeling beige paint into a kind of interrogation lamp. Across from me, Olivia glided in like she was walking a runway instead of into a family court designer suit. Perfect hair, lips curved in that soft little smirk I knew meant she thought she'd already won. She took her place beside her attorney, a man with a sharp navy suit and a sharper jawline. Behind them, our parents slid into the front row of the gallery, my mother's pearls gleaming, my father's tie perfectly knotted. They looked like a holiday card about successful families, not people who had served me court papers 2 weeks after our aunt's funeral. The judge flipped a page. This is the matter of Olivia Hart versus Emily Hart. Petition to enforce amended will and recover misappropriated inheritance funds. He glanced at me over his glasses. Miss Hart, you understand the nature of the allegations against you? Misappropriated. The word landed in my chest like ice. I had never touched Olivia's money. In fact, I'd barely seen any of Aunt Margaret's estate yet. Probate was still in process. Yet here I was, in the respondent's chair, as if I'd stolen from my own sister. On the surface, it probably looked simple, the responsible but poor younger sibling, clinging to money that didn't belong to her, refusing to transfer her rightful share to the glamorous, successful sister. But I knew my family. If they dragged me into an actual courtroom, it meant they were confident the paper was already stacked against me. Your Honor, Olivia's lawyer said smoothly, rising to his feet. We have bank statements and a signed family settlement agreement showing Miss Emily Hart agreed to surrender her share of the estate. We're just asking the court to enforce what she already consented to. He slid a thick folder onto his table with theatrical care, the stack of pages landing with a dull thud that made my throat tighten. He didn't look at me, but Olivia did. Her expression flickered into a performance of concern. She said softly, loud enough for the microphones. We tried to keep this out of court. You know you promised you didn't need the money. I'm just enforcing what's fair. The lie was so smooth it almost sounded reasonable. My mother leaned forward in the gallery, stage whispering to my father, we always knew Emily was ungrateful. Poor Olivia has to clean this up properly. The judge nodded to the clerk. Provide Miss Hart a copy of the agreement on file. The clerk came over and handed me a stapled packet. As the paper slid into my hands, I smelled faint toner and something vaguely metallic. The pages rasped as I flipped through, every turn a scrape against my nerves. There it was, Family Settlement Agreement in bold at the top. My name neatly typed beneath Olivia's. And just below, a looping signature that looked disturbingly like mine for a second. My vision blurred. It was close enough that anyone who didn't know my hand inside and out would accept it. But my stomach twisted as my eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. The notary seal was from a bank branch in a city I had never set foot in. I read the city name twice to be sure, my heart thudding louder with each syllable. And then another detail snapped into focus, the date. The agreement was dated 3 days before Aunt Margaret's actual date of death. My face stayed neutral. Years in this family had trained me well. Inside, though, everything screamed. They hadn't just twisted a conversation, they had rewritten time. They'd put my alleged consent on record before the woman in question had even died. Miss Hart, the judge repeated, impatient now, your signature appears on this document. Do you dispute that this is your agreement? I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay even. I dispute that I ever signed this, Your Honor. I've never been to that bank, and I never agreed to surrender my share of my aunt's estate. He frowned, then glanced back down at the file. Well, there is a notarized settlement agreement already on record. Based on these preliminary documents, there may already be a presumption of agreement. Unless you can prove otherwise, the court will likely enforce the settlement as written. Humiliation and fury flooded me in equal measure. To them, it was all so neat. A signature, a seal, some bank pages, and suddenly, I was the liar who changed her mind. They'd done what they always did, weaponized paperwork, confident no one would look beyond the stamp. The judge sighed. Given the seriousness of the allegation, I'm going to call a brief recess. Miss Hart, you may use the time to review the file. We'll reconvene shortly. The gavel tapped. Chairs scraped. Olivia leaned toward her lawyer, smiling like this was a foregone conclusion. I sat there for a moment, gripping the packet until the staples dug into my fingers. How had they even pulled this off? As I stood and followed the clerk to a side room to review the documents, one thought beat in my head harder than my pulse. Just how many offices had they lied to? And how deep did their paper trail against me already go? Sitting in the little side conference room, with the thin door muting the sounds of the courtroom, I spread the papers out in front of me, and, for a moment, I wasn't 34 anymore. I was a kid again, watching Olivia bask under the warm spotlight my parents had built for her. She'd always been the golden child. Private schools, expensive extracurriculars, the kind of destination wedding people post about for months. Our star, my mother would say, smoothing Olivia's hair. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the one who balanced the checkbook at 16 and took extra shifts to pay my own way through a state college. Any time I asked for something, new shoes, a school trip, the answer was the same. You don't need much, Emily. Let your sister shine. Think of the family reputation. They called Olivia's greed ambition and my boundaries selfishness. When I was 19, they helped me by co-signing my first student loan. Years later, when I tried to say no to a weekend of unpaid babysitting for Olivia's kids, my father snapped. We co-signed your debt. Young lady, you owe us. The loan wasn't just numbers on a statement. It was a leash. It was the same pattern when it came to money and documents. One afternoon, I found out they had added Olivia as an emergency contact on my bank account. My mother brushed it off. Just in case something happens to you. She can help manage things. It sounded caring until I realized they'd done it without asking. Another time, they pushed a simple family agreement across the table about our childhood home. Buried halfway down was a clause quietly waiving any claim of mine if they sold the house. To Olivia, of course. I refused to sign, and suddenly I was paranoid and ungrateful. The only person who never treated me like a tool was Aunt Margaret. My mother's older sister never married, never had kids, while everyone else circled her like vultures asking about her portfolio. I was the one who slept on her couch after her chemo, who drove her to appointments, who organized her pillbox. My parents and Olivia would swoop in for an hour with flowers and Instagram-worthy photos, then disappear again. One evening, when she was having a good day, Aunt Margaret took my hand. I changed my will, she said quietly. It's 50-50 between you and Olivia now. She's had enough help. You've done the work. I was stunned. Part of me was relieved, part terrified. I could already hear my mother's voice if she found out. I told Aunt Margaret to make sure she used a real estate attorney, to keep copies in a safety deposit box, to do everything properly because my family would not take kindly to being told no. I never saw the final paperwork, but I trusted her more than I trusted any of them. After the funeral, while I was still moving through molasses, my parents went straight back to form. Just let Olivia handle the estate, my father said, clapping a too heavy hand on my shoulder. She understands these things. You're exhausted. They offered to take the paperwork off my plate, like it was some generous favor. Olivia came armed with folders and a sympathetic smile. There are just a couple of forms, she said, sliding things toward me at my aunt's dining table. The smell of lilies and stale coffee still hanging in the air. Funeral expenses authorization, a temporary power of attorney so I can deal with the brokerage accounts. Nothing big. Grief makes people sloppy, but my history with them made me careful. I read every line. Anytime I saw language that looked too broad, full authority, irrevocable, waive any and all claims. I pushed the paper back. I'm not signing that, I said quietly. Her mask slipped for half a second. You're being paranoid, Emily. I'm just trying to get this done before taxes hit. I remember the sharpness in her voice, the flash in her eyes. I brushed it off then, told myself I was imagining it. Looking at the fake agreement in front of me now, I realized I hadn't been paranoid enough. Back in the recess room, I studied the so-called family settlement agreement. According to this, I had voluntarily and irrevocably transferred any claim to Aunt Margaret's real estate and investments to Olivia in exchange for a gift of $10,000. Attached were bank records showing a wire transfer for that amount, supposedly into an account in my name. There was the fake notary seal from a city I'd never been to, the neat scrawl of a notary I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a miscommunication or a twisted conversation. They had likely forged my signature and built a fake money trail to make it look legitimate. They had turned me into a liar on paper. I forced my breathing to slow. Instead of dissolving like they expected, I pulled out my phone and started taking photos of every single page, zooming in on the notary seal, the date, the account numbers. I wrote the case number at the top of my notes app, copied down the alleged wire transfer details and the notary's full name. Every detail that had once been used to trap me was now potential evidence. When the clerk popped her head in to say the judge would be ready soon, I met her eyes and kept my voice steady. I'll need a full copy of the file, please. The initial petition, all exhibits, everything they've submitted. She nodded, rifling through a stack of forms. Sure, I'll get that printed. You know, this case was fast-tracked because everyone signed the settlement weeks ago. Today was supposed to be just a rubber stamp hearing. Her casual comment hit me harder than any accusation. Fast-tracked, everyone signed. In the court system, on the record, I already agreed to be erased. Thank you, I said, because politeness costs nothing and documentation is everything. As she left, the path ahead of me crystallized. Arguing with my family wouldn't save me. The only way out of this was to step outside their narrative and go straight to the institutions themselves, the bank, the notary records, the court's own logs. They had built a paper cage around me. If I wanted to get out, I'd have to make the same systems they'd used into my witnesses instead. The judge's words were still echoing in my head. Postponed 1 week to allow the respondent to obtain counsel. When I stepped out of the courthouse and straight into the pale midday light, I didn't go home. I didn't call my parents. I went to the bank listed on the alleged wire transfer. Inside, it was all fluorescent lights and muted carpet, the soft whir of printers and the occasional beep of the ticket system. Numbers blinked red on an LED display above the waiting area. It smelled faintly of toner and coffee. Ordinary. Neutral. The kind of place my family assumed would always believe the paper over the person. I walked up to the customer service desk and placed the photocopy of the wire confirmation on the counter. Hi, I need to verify a wire transfer and a notary record connected to a court case, I said, keeping my voice steady. The documents say $10,000 was sent to an account in my name. Here's the account number and transaction ID. The woman behind the desk, her name tag reading R. Patel, gave me the polite, efficient smile of someone who had heard every kind of banking panic. Of course, ma'am. I'll just need your ID. I handed over my driver's license. She typed my information into her terminal, eyes flicking between the screen and the paper. For a few seconds, her expression stayed neutral. Then a small frown creased her forehead. I'm not seeing any incoming wire for that amount into your accounts, she said slowly. Let me try searching by the transaction ID you provided. She keyed in the long string of numbers printed at the bottom of the so-called bank record attached to my court file. The system processing bar blinked, then she squinted. Okay, so there is a transfer with this ID, she murmured, more to herself than to me. But it's interesting. She turned the monitor slightly away, as if instinctively guarding it. This shows a transfer from an account belonging to an Olivia Hart to another account under Richard and Linda Hart. Your name only appears in the memo line, like a note, gift to Emily. There's no account in your name involved at all. Anger simmered under my ribs, almost comforting in how clear it felt. They hadn't just lied. They'd literally used my name as a label to decorate a transaction between themselves. So in your system, I asked, keeping my tone calm. No money ever entered an account that legally belongs to me. Correct, she said, meeting my eyes. Her voice dropped a notch. The documents you're holding show this as a payment to you, but our system shows purely internal family transfers. She glanced around, then leaned in slightly. I should explain something. Every notary act done at this branch is logged, and we have CCTV coverage of the notary desk. Every wire transfer is tied to exact timestamps and the user IDs of whoever initiated them. If you believe there's forgery or misuse of your information, we can escalate this. How? I asked. If you file a formal dispute and indicate alleged forgery, our compliance department can pull the CCTV and internal logs, she said. It creates an official record, and we're required to review it. For the first time that day, I felt something shift. Not victory. Not yet, but the outline of a path. Let's do that, I said. She printed a multi-page dispute form and slid it toward me with a pen. I read every line, then carefully wrote, possible forged signature and misuse of my personal data in court filing referencing this alleged payment. I listed the case number, the transaction ID, and even my sister's and parents' account names as shown on the printout. When I was done, Miss Patel scanned it into their system and stamped the top with the day's date and time. You'll get a reference number by email, she said, tapping the screen. Now, about the notary. She pulled up another system window and then walked over to a back printer. A minute later, she returned with a single sheet. This is a list of notaries currently employed at the branch, printed on your document seal. I scanned the names. The notary on my settlement wasn't listed. And, she added, pointing to a string of digits on my photocopied agreement, this commission number right here. Our records show it belonged to a notary who left the bank 2 years ago. Their seal should have been destroyed. My anxiety spiked, but so did my sense of leverage. This wasn't a gray area or a misunderstanding. This was a dead commission number resurrected on a document I allegedly signed in a city I'd never visited. Thank you, I said quietly. She nodded. Our compliance officer will review this. If what you're saying is accurate, they'll likely want to talk to you. Watch for a call. From the bank, I went straight back to the courthouse, clutching my fresh dispute receipt like a talisman. At the records office, there was a glass window and a line of people with folders and manila envelopes. When it was my turn, I slid my case number and ID under the glass. The clerk, a middle-aged man with reading glasses hanging on a chain, pulled my file up on his screen. What are you looking for, Ms. Hart? He asked. I need to see how this settlement agreement was filed, I said. Who submitted it? What the system shows for my consent. He clicked around, then turned the monitor a fraction so I could see. Here, he said, pointing. The documents were e-filed from the law firm account belonging to Hart Theven Lowell, LLP. That's your parents' attorney, I assume. I nodded, my jaw tight. There's a checkbox here that says, Agreed settlement. All parties have reviewed and consented, he continued. On your side, you're listed as self-represented but in agreement. That's why it was fast-tracked. Judges rarely dig deep on agreed settlements. It's assumed both sides had counsel or at least understood what they were signing. But I never logged into this system, I said. I never clicked anything. I didn't even know this existed until I was served. He sighed, the weary sound of someone who's seen this before. Unfortunately, when attorneys certify that everyone's agreed, the court relies on that representation. If the judge signs this at the next hearing, reversing it later would require a full-blown fraud case. It's much harder once it's finalized. How long do I have? I asked. You've got a few days to file a formal objection and request an evidentiary hearing instead of a simple approval, he said. He printed a sheet and slid it under the glass. List your reasons, alleged forgery, disputed payment, whatever applies, attach any supporting documents. Once it's stamped, the judge has to treat this as contested. On paper, I was already halfway erased from my aunt's estate. But now, for the first time, I could see the procedural rungs on the cliff I was hanging from. I'll file it today, I said. I left with the objection form stamped and dated, a receipt in my hand, and a checklist of what I'd need. Evidence of forgery, bank letters, maybe even a signature expert. It felt like arming myself for a war my family had started months ago without telling me. That evening, as I sat at my kitchen table organizing everything, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered. Ms. Hart? A calm voice said. This is Ms. Patel from the bank. Our compliance officer reviewed your dispute and would like to meet you in person. There's something you should see on our CCTV. I pictured the branch, the notary desk, the empty chair. Of course, I said. When? Tomorrow morning, if you're available, she replied. He'll introduce himself when you arrive. He'll be the one in the black suit. As I hung up, it hit me. Whatever was on that footage might not just offend me. It might be the thing that finally flips their entire case on its head. The next morning, I sat in a small glass, walled conference room at the bank, hands folded around a paper cup of water I hadn't touched. The door opened with a soft click, and a man in a black suit stepped in, carrying a slim folder and a USB drive between his fingers. "I'm his heart," he asked. I stood automatically. "Yes!" "I'm Daniel Cho, from the bank's Compliance and Fraud Investigations Unit," he said, offering a brief, professional handshake. His voice was calm, precise. "Thank you for coming in. We take notarization fraud very seriously, Ms. Hart." Cautious hope flickered under my ribs. For once, someone in authority wasn't dismissing me as dramatic or confused. He was treating my complaint like a real problem. He sat across from me, opened the folder, and slid a printed copy of my family settlement agreement between us. "I've reviewed your dispute, the notary details, and the associated transaction," he said. He plugged the USB drive into a small laptop and angled the screen so we could both see. "Let me walk you through what we found." He tapped the notary seal on the document. "First, this commission number here. Our internal records show this notary's commission was deactivated 2 years ago. That means they were no longer authorized to notarize anything on the date shown. Their seal should have been destroyed." He clicked to a screen of internal logs, rows of time stamps and codes. Second, the time stamp printed under the notary block. 2:43 p.m. on March 18th. Our branch CCTV covers the lobby, the offices, and the notary desk. We pulled the footage for that day and time. He opened a video file. The grainy image showed the bank lobby at 2042, 2C43, 2C44 p.m. A teller, a couple of customers, the notary desk empty. Then the camera angle shifted, showing a seating area. There, clear as day, were Olivia and my mother, perched in chairs, handbags at their feet, talking to a general banker at a side desk. "You'll notice," Daniel said, "no one is at the notary station at any point during this time window. And there's no footage anywhere from that day showing you on the premises." My throat tightened as I watched my sister laughing on the screen, the same easy smile she wore at the funeral. I wasn't there. I never had been. If this document had been notarized here, he continued, we would also have a corresponding entry in our notary journal. Date, time, type of document, signer's IDs. We don't. Whoever created this used an old seal image or copied the commission info. It did not go through our processes. He minimized the video and brought up the wire transfer details. A's for the $10,000. Our logs confirm what Ms. Patel told you. It was an internal transfer between accounts belonging to your sister and your parents. Your name appears only in the memo line. There is no account belonging to you involved in that transaction. From our standpoint, no funds were ever transferred to you. The anger that rose in me this time was clean, almost sharp. They hadn't made a mistake. They had built a false world on paper and expected everyone to live in it. Daniel clicked a few more times and then printed a document. The printer in the corner hummed, spitting out letterhead with the bank's logo at the top. He signed it with a practiced hand and slid it across the table. This letter states 3 things clearly, he said. 1. The bank has no record of notarizing the family settlement agreement you provided. 2. No funds were transferred into any account owned by you in connection with the reference transaction ID. And 3. The notary commission number on that agreement is inactive and not affiliated with this bank as of the date listed. He met my eyes. If needed, I or another representative can provide an affidavit or appear in court to explain our findings. I ran my fingers lightly over the embossed logo. For the first time, the weight in my chest shifted from pure dread to something heavier but steadier. Validation, and a kind of righteous anger I hadn't let myself feel until now. I wasn't crazy. The evidence they'd weaponized was rotten, A week later, the courtroom felt different. No longer a quiet conveyor belt destined to stamp me out of existence, but an arena. I had filed my objection, attached the bank's letter, and formally requested an evidentiary hearing. The judge sat a little straighter, a thicker file in front of him. Olivia walked in with our parents like they were attending another performance. She looked confident, if slightly irritated, as though I'd inconvenienced her. Her lawyer rose immediately. "Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion by Ms. Hart's paranoia," he began. "The agreement reflects what everyone discussed informally." The judge held up a hand. His tone was cooler than before. "Counsel, I have reviewed the respondent's objection and the exhibits attached, including a letter from the bank's compliance department. Before I enforce any agreement, we will examine its authenticity. I was sworn in first. I kept my voice even as I told the court I had never visited that branch, never met the notary whose name appeared under the seal, never received $10,000 into any of my accounts, and never signed away my rights to Aunt Margaret's estate. I described how I only learned of the so-called settlement when I was served with the petition. Then Daniel took the stand in his black suit, just as calm as he'd been in the conference room. He explained his role, outlined the bank's standard procedures for notarization and wire transfers, and then went point by point the deactivated commission number, the missing notary journal entry, the empty notary desk on CCTV during the exact time stamp, the internal transfer with my name only in the memo line. Based on your investigation, the judge asked, is there any indication that this document was properly notarized at your branch or that $10,000 was ever paid to Ms. Hart? None whatsoever. Your Honor, Daniel replied. Our records indicate the opposite. The judge compared the signature on the agreement to other verified signatures of mine, from my ID, from the objection I just filed. Even from where I sat, the differences were obvious. The slant was wrong, the loops too careful. He turned to Olivia's attorney. Counsel, how did your office obtain this document, and what due diligence did you perform before filing it as an agreed settlement? There was a flicker of discomfort on the lawyer's face. The document was provided by my clients. Your Honor, he said carefully. They represented that Ms. Hart had signed it at home after discussions within the family. Signed it at home, the judge repeated, eyebrow lifting. The notary block certifies that Ms. Emily Hart personally appeared before the notary at a bank branch on a specific date and time. Those statements cannot both be true. Olivia shifted in her seat. She signed it at my place. She blurted out, we took it to the bank later. The notary just stamped it, that's all. My parents stared straight ahead, rigid. The judge's tone hardened. Ms. Hart, you understand that filing a forged, notarized agreement with this court is not a family misunderstanding. It is potential fraud on the court and could carry serious consequences. Silence pressed down on the room. Given the evidence, he continued, this court will not enforce the so-called settlement agreement. Any presumption of agreement is vacated. The original estate distribution, as reflected in the probate filings, is reinstated pending proper review. Olivia's mouth fell open. My mother's hand flew to her pearls. My father finally looked up, complexion ashen. Furthermore, the judge said, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into possible forgery and fraud. Ms. Hart, he looked at me, you may wish to consult counsel regarding any civil remedies available to you. Relief washed over me so fast it was almost painful. I had protected my share, and more importantly, Aunt Margaret's wishes. But there was a grief threaded through it too. My family hadn't just tried to cut me out. They had been willing to commit a crime to erase me. I intend, I said quietly but clearly, to file separate actions to remove my parents and my sister from any roles related to my finances or affairs going forward. The judge nodded. That would be prudent. As the hearing adjourned, I watched Olivia and my parents huddle with their lawyer, their polished mask cracked for once. I felt the weight of what had just happened settle around me. Not just a legal win, but the confirmation that there was no going back to pretending this was normal. The court could undo their forged papers, but only I could decide what to do with the people who had signed them. Back in my small apartment, the silence felt different. Before, it had always carried a hint of exile, like I'd been pushed to the edges of my own life. Now it felt like a locked door between me and a storm I'd finally stepped out of. On the shelf by my desk sat a new fireproof box inside, the court order refusing to enforce the forged agreement, the bank's letters spelling out the fraud, and a copy of Aunt Margaret's original I'd retrieved from her attorney. For the first time, the papers in my life were there to protect me instead of trap me. I found myself thinking about all the years I'd spent translating cruelty into excuses. They're just stressed. They're old-fashioned. That's how they show love. Meanwhile, they'd been quietly putting their names on my debts, on my accounts, on my future. This time, they'd just taken it one notarized lie too far, so I started where they always had with the paperwork. I logged into every account I owned and stripped them out. My parents, Olivia, gone from emergency contacts, removed from bank authorizations. I changed every password, added two-factor authentication, and set alerts so my phone would ping if a single dollar moved without me. Then I hired an estate attorney of my own and drafted a will and power of attorney that named two trusted friends instead of any blood relative. If something happened to me, my life would no longer be an open bar for them to drink from. To cut off the rumor mill before it even started, I sent a brief email to my extended family. There was a legal dispute over Aunt Margaret's estate. The court found serious issues with a document my sister filed. I won't be discussing details, but I won't tolerate rumors. No drama, no accusations, just a line of fact they'd have to climb over if they wanted to spin a story. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt steady. They now knew that a bank, a judge, and a court file had all seen behind their performance. They would think twice before forging my name again. I chose low contact that edged engine to no contact. When they did reach out, I kept everything in writing, saved every message, and refused to meet without a clear purpose and a witness. I wasn't going to argue with them about what had happened. I was just going to document who they chose to be. Weeks later, a thin envelope arrived from the district attorney's office. They had opened a preliminary investigation into the alleged forgery. I read it once, slid it into the fireproof box, and closed the lid. Not a threat this time, just another piece of the record. Olivia sent one last text. You didn't have to ruin everything over some paperwork. I stared at it for a long moment, then took a screenshot and archived it without replying. I didn't need to explain to her that she was the one who had tried to ruin me with that same paperwork. In my family, they always believed a signature could erase me. This time, it erased their lies instead. If someone in your life has ever tried to use paperwork, money, or the system to control you, remember, you're not crazy and you're not alone. If you want more stories where toxic games backfire, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next episode. And tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from? And have you ever seen family or coworkers try something like this?